The glass of grape juice flew directly toward my white dress. The purple liquid spread across the fabric, like a stain of shame for everyone to see. Skylar Dree, my own 8-year-old granddaughter, stared at me with a mischievous grin, holding the empty glass in her small hands. The silence lasted barely 2 seconds before the entire living room erupted in laughter. "Skylar, you are terrible," my daughter-in-law, Tanisha Hayes Dupree, shrieked between bursts of laughter, though there wasn't a hint of reprimand in her voice. Instead, she seemed proud of what her daughter had done. My son Marcus covered his mouth to hide his amusement, but his eyes glittered with enjoyment. The other guests pointed at my ruined dress and whispered comments they thought I couldn't hear. "Mommy said you don't belong here," Skylar murmured with that false innocence only a manipulated child can display. Her words echoed in my ears like church bells on a Sunday morning, clear and impossible to ignore. Tanisha didn't deny anything. She just kept laughing as she served more cake, acting as if ruining a 64-year-old woman's dress was the perfect entertainment for her birthday party. I stayed seated in that uncomfortable chair, feeling the juice stick to my skin and stain the dress I had bought, especially for the occasion. I had spent $150 on that dress, money I truly couldn't afford, but I did it because I thought that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I thought perhaps my family would treat me with respect for once in my life. How naive I had been. How foolish to believe that anything had changed after all these years of humiliation and disrespect. My hands trembled slightly as I rose from the chair, but I held my head high. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here. Not in front of all these strangers who now had a funny story to tell in their own homes about the old woman who was humiliated at a birthday party. "Aren't you going to say anything, Grandma?" Skylar asked in that sweet voice adults find adorable, but which I recognized as pure venom. The child had been coached for this. Someone had taught her exactly what to say and when to say it. My eyes drifted toward Tanisha, who continued to smile as she cut more pieces of cake, completely satisfied with the show she had orchestrated. "No, sweetie," I replied in a voice so calm it surprised even me. "I don't have anything to say." I headed toward the kitchen to find something to clean myself with, but I knew the damage was done. The dress was ruined, my dignity trampled, and my heart broken once more by the family who was supposed to love me. In the kitchen, as I futilely rubbed the purple stains with a damp towel, I could hear the laughter continuing in the living room. Someone had turned the music up louder, as if they wanted to celebrate my humiliation with an accompanying soundtrack. My hands moved automatically, wiping and rubbing, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I recalled all the times I had come to these family gatherings with hope in my heart. All the times I had brought gifts no one appreciated, food no one ate, and love no one wanted to receive. For years, I had believed the problem was me, that perhaps I didn't know how to approach my own family, that maybe I was too old or too boring to fit into their modern lives. But standing there in that kitchen, with my ruined dress and my pride in pieces, I finally understood the truth I had been denying for so many years. They didn't want me there. They never had. I was just a family obligation they tolerated out of manners, a burden they had to endure on special occasions because it was the right thing to do. The music from the living room grew louder, and the voices more cheerful. It was as if my absence had improved the party, as if they could finally relax and truly enjoy themselves now that the uncomfortable old woman was out of sight. Skylar was probably receiving congratulations for her mischief, and Tanisha would be retelling the story over and over, adding dramatic details each time. I left the towel on the counter and headed toward the front door. No one noticed when I grabbed my purse and keys. No one said goodbye when I opened the door. No one asked if I needed help or if I was okay. I just walked out of that house in silence with my stained dress and my heart finally clear about what I had to do. The fresh night air hit my face as I reached my car. My hands trembled slightly as I searched for my keys in my bag, but it wasn't from sadness. It was something different. It was the feeling of someone who has finally woken up after a very long, very painful sleep. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me had dry eyes and an expression I hadn't seen in years. Determination. That was what I saw in my reflection. Pure, cold determination, like December ice. This wasn't the first time my family had treated me like I was invisible. As I drove back to my small apartment, memories began to flow like water from a broken dam. Every week for the last 5 years had been a repetition of the same humiliating pattern. The invitations always arrived at the last minute, as if I were an afterthought. "Essie, come over for Sunday dinner." Nothing special, just family. But I knew it was never nothing special to them. I was the filler. The person who completed the head count so the table didn't look so empty. I always arrived with something homemade, a dessert that had taken me hours to prepare, or an appetizer I had seen in a magazine and wanted to try. I spent between $30 and $50 each time on ingredients I truly couldn't afford, waking up at 5 a.m. to have everything ready. And each time it was the same. They left my food in a corner of the table while everyone else rushed toward the main dish brought by someone else. "This looks so delicious," they would say, completely ignoring my contribution. By the end of the afternoon, my container always returned home, with me nearly untouched, with barely 1 or 2 servings taken out of courtesy. I remembered Marcus's birthday last year. I had spent $200 that I didn't have on a watch he had mentioned wanting. I took 2 buses to get to the downtown jewelry store because I couldn't afford a taxi, and I arrived home with swollen feet and a heart full of expectation. I thought that maybe, just maybe, my gift would be the one that excited him the most. When it was time to open gifts, Marcus unwrapped mine last, almost as a formality. "Thanks, Mom," he mumbled without even looking at the watch properly, and left it on the table to continue with Tanisha's gift. She had bought him a shirt that cost half of what I had spent, but he tried it on immediately and spent the rest of the afternoon showing it off to all the guests. My watch was forgotten among the crumpled wrapping paper and used napkins. No one else saw it. No one asked how much it had cost or where I had gotten it. To them, it was just another gift from old Essie, something they expected to receive but that generated no real excitement or gratitude. Skylar's celebrations were even worse. Every time she had a school play or a swim meet, I was the only one who didn't receive a formal invitation. I would find out by chance when I overheard Marcus mentioning it on the phone, and I would have to timidly ask if I could go. "Sure, Mom, you can come if you want," he always said, with that tone that made it clear my presence was optional and not particularly desired. I arrived at those events with flowers I had bought using my grocery money, sitting in the back row while Marcus and Tanisha took the best seats in the front. When Skylar went on stage or stepped onto the podium, I clapped louder than anyone, my heart swelling with pride for my only granddaughter. But afterward, when everyone gathered for family photos, I was always left out of the frame. "It's just for the parents," Tanisha would explain with that fake smile she had perfected over the years. I would step aside and watch them pose for dozens of pictures that they later uploaded to social media. In none of those images was there any evidence that Skylar had a grandmother who adored her and had been there supporting her from the Stands.Sunday family gatherings at Marcus's house were exercises in emotional endurance. I arrived promptly at 12 noon, as I had always been taught was proper, but the meal was never ready until 3 in the afternoon. While I waited, I sat in the living room watching Marcus play video games, with Skylar or Tanisha talk on the phone with her friends about plans that didn't include me. "Can I help with anything in the kitchen?" I always offered, but Tanisha rejected me with a wave of her hand. "Don't worry, Essie. Everything's under control." So I sat there for hours, feeling like an old piece of furniture that no one wanted but no one dared to throw away either. When they finally served the food, I always ended up in the most uncomfortable chair, usually the one near the kitchen so I could help serve if needed. Conversations flowed around me like water around a rock. They talked about people I didn't know, places I hadn't been, and plans that didn't include me. Remember when we went to that new restaurant last month? Marcus would ask Tanisha, and she would begin a detailed story about a family dinner I hadn't been invited to. I chewed my food in silence, wondering why I kept going to these gatherings that only reminded me how little I mattered in their lives. But the worst of all was Christmas. For years, I had spent up to $500 on gifts for Marcus, Tanisha, and Skylar. Money I had to save for months by working extra hours at my part-time office job. I wrapped each gift carefully, using expensive paper and elegant bows, writing personal cards with messages full of love. Their gifts for me always arrived unwrapped or hastily covered in newspaper. They were usually things bought at the last minute from a discount store. Or worse, items they no longer wanted and decided to give to me. Once Tanisha gave me a face cream that was half-used, explaining that it hadn't worked well for her, but maybe I would like it. I smiled and thanked them, as if it were the most wonderful gift in the world, because that was what was expected of me. To be grateful, humble, to accept the crumbs of affection they decided to give me, and act as if it were a feast. Now, sitting in my car outside my apartment building, with my dress ruined by Skylar's grape juice, I could finally see the situation with crystal clarity. It wasn't love that kept me going to those gatherings. It was fear. Fear of being completely alone. Fear of admitting that the family for whom I had sacrificed so much for so many years didn't truly want me. But tonight, something had changed inside me. Today's humiliation had been different, public and deliberate. It wasn't just neglect or thoughtlessness. It was pure cruelty, specifically designed to make me feel small and insignificant in front of strangers. And I had allowed it to happen. I had sat there accepting the mistreatment as if it were normal, as if it were what I deserved. But no more. The first time Marcus asked me for money, I was 58 years old and had just been widowed. My husband, Robert Bobby Dupree, had died of a heart attack while working in the garden one April morning, leaving me with a small inheritance and a loneliness I thought my children would fill. How wrong I was. Marcus came to my house 3 weeks after the funeral, with red eyes and a story about problems at his job. "Mom, I need $5,000, it's temporary. I swear I'll pay you back in 2 months." He looked so desperate, so vulnerable that I couldn't say no. That money came from Robert's life insurance. Money I had planned to use to fix the leaky roof and replace the old windows in the house. Those 2 months turned into 6, then into a year. When I finally dared to ask him about the money, Marcus got angry with me. "Seriously, you're going to pressure me for money when you just got widowed? I thought you wanted to help your family." Guilt consumed me for weeks. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe a good mother shouldn't worry about money when her son was in trouble. That was just the first of many emergencies that required my financial help. The next year, he needed $3,000 to pay off a credit card debt. Then it was $2,000 for the deposit on a bigger apartment. Then $100 to fix his car. Each time he promised to pay me back. And each time I waited months without seeing a single dollar returned. But what hurt most wasn't losing the money. It was the way they treated me afterward. Instead of gratitude, I received indifference. Instead of respect, I was met with a condescending attitude that clearly said they expected my help as if it were their right, not my generosity. I vividly remembered the day Tanisha asked me to co-sign for their first house. She was barely 23 and didn't have enough credit history. "Essie, we need you to sign these papers. It's just a formality. You won't have to pay anything. We just need your name so the bank approves the loan." They took me to the bank office and I wore my best suit, the same one I had worn to Robert's funeral. The loan officer explained the contract terms, but I barely understood half of what he said. Marcus and Tanisha assured me it was routine, that thousands of parents did the same for their children every day. "Just sign here, Mom. Trust us." And I signed. I signed because I wanted to believe they finally saw me as an important part of their lives. I signed because I thought maybe this would make them value me more. I signed because a naive part of me believed it would make Skylar remember me fondly when she was older. For the first 2 years, everything seemed to go well. Marcus had a stable job at a local construction firm, and Tanisha worked part-time at a retail store. They made their monthly payments without any problems, and I felt proud to have helped them buy their first home. I finally had something concrete I had done for my family, something that truly mattered. But then Marcus lost his job. The company he worked for went bankrupt during the economic crisis, leaving dozens of employees without work or the benefits they had been promised. Suddenly, mortgage payments became impossible to maintain. I found out about the situation not because they told me directly, but because the bank called me as the co-signer. "Miss Dupree, the payments for the property you co-signed for on Elmwood Avenue are 3 months past due. If they are not brought current immediately, we will have to proceed with the foreclosure process." The bank employee's voice was cold and professional, but his words hit me like a hammer to the chest. When I confronted Marcus about it, he yelled at me for the first time in his adult life. "It's not my fault I lost my job. Do you think I wanted this to happen? And now you're pressuring me like I'm some kind of criminal." Tanisha was standing behind him with Skylar in her arms, looking at me as if I were responsible for all their problems. That night, I went home and calculated exactly how much money I had saved. If I paid the 3 months of back mortgage payments, I would have less than $1,000 left in my savings account. But if I didn't pay, they would lose the house and my credit would be ruined forever. I had no real option. I paid the $8,000 they owed, practically emptying all my emergency reserves. They thanked me. Marcus mumbled a thank you without looking me in the eye. Tanisha didn't even do that. They acted as if it had been my obligation to pay, as if signing as co-signer had automatically made me responsible for their financial mistakes. And the worst part was that, technically, they were right. The following months were a nightmare of constant calls from the bank. Every time Marcus and Tanisha were late on a payment, I was the first to find out. My phone would ring at 8 in the morning with bank employees reminding me of my contractual obligations, as if I were a habitual debtor instead of a mother who had only wanted to help her son. I had to get a second job cleaning offices at night to cover the payments when they couldn't. I came home at 11, my back aching and my hands cracked from cleaning chemicals, all to keep afloat a house where I wasn't even welcome. That was the cruelest part. After all the money I had put in, after risking my financial security for them, I was still treated like an outsider in their home. They never offered me a key. They never said, "This is your home too." They never acknowledged that without my help, they'd be living in a rented apartment or back with their parents. Things got worse when they decided to remodel the kitchen. "It's an investment," Marcus said when he asked for another $4,000 for new cabinets and appliances. "It'll increase the property value." I knew it was a lie. They just wanted a nicer kitchen and expected me to pay for it. But I felt trapped, so I agreed. I worked double shifts for 6 months to raise that money. My feet swelled so much that I had to sleep with my legs elevated, and I developed chronic back pain that still bothers me. All that effort for wooden cabinets Tanisha had seen in a magazine and decided she needed. The kitchen's inauguration was a party for 30 people. I wasn't invited. I only found out through the photos Marcus uploaded to Facebook. Everyone laughing and toasting in the kitchen I had paid for. In one photo, Tanisha posed proudly beside the new granite island, wine glass in hand, smiling brightly. That night, I called Marcus and asked why I hadn't been invited. "We didn't think you'd be interested, Mom. You know you don't like crowds," he said. It was a lie, and we both knew it. My presence would have been uncomfortable. How could they brag about their new kitchen if the person who actually paid for it was there to remind them of the truth? That was the first time I realized my family might be using me. But even then, with all the signs in front of me, I made excuses for them. They're young, I told myself. They don't understand the value of money yet. Someday they'll thank me. How blind I had been, how desperate to be loved, that I confused being exploited with being needed. Everything changed when Skylar turned 7. I had been planning her birthday for months, saving every penny to buy her the perfect gift. She loved horses, so I bought a $300 horse-themed dollhouse from a downtown toy store. A beautiful piece with miniature stables, tiny horses, and leather saddles. The night before her birthday, I stayed up wrapping each little piece separately, using gold paper and pink ribbons to match the party's theme. When I arrived at the celebration, Tanisha greeted me with a forced smile. Marcus avoided my eyes. "Essie, so glad you made it," Tanisha said in her practiced sweet tone. "Can you put the gifts over there on that table?" She pointed to a small corner table far from the main gift pile. My presents were clearly set apart, as if they didn't belong. The party was full of Skylar's friends and their parents, people I didn't know but who fit perfectly into Marcus and Tanisha's world. I sat alone, watching them interact naturally with others while ignoring me completely, as if I were invisible. When it was time for presents, Skylar opened the others first. Bicycle, video game, expensive doll. Each met with laughter and cheers. My gifts were left for last, opened without enthusiasm. "How pretty, Grandma," she said each time, her tone rehearsed, her smile forced. She didn't even realize all the pieces belonged to one set. My magical gift became a pile of disconnected toys, scattered and forgotten. When she asked to go play with her new bike, Tanisha nodded immediately. The children ran outside, leaving my gifts abandoned among the torn paper and ribbons. I sat there watching, heartbroken. $300 wasted. But what hurt most was knowing that nothing I did would ever be enough. Marcus approached me and said, "Mom, you didn't have to spend so much. Skylar has plenty of toys. Next time, it's better just to give us cash. It's more practical." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. After all the loans, sacrifices, and years of help, my own son reduced my love to money. To him, I had become nothing more than an ATM with legs. That night, when I came home carrying the remnants of the dollhouse Skylar had discarded, I sat in my kitchen and cried for the first time in months. I didn't cry over the money or the unappreciated gift. I cried because I finally understood that I wasn't a beloved grandmother in that house. I was simply a convenient source of money, tolerated only as long as I remained financially useful. The months that followed brought a series of shameless requests. Marcus needed money to fix the air conditioner. Tanisha wanted me to pay for Skylar's piano lessons. Then they decided, without even asking me, to enroll Skylar in a private school, expecting me to cover a significant portion of the tuition. Each request came with the same entitled tone, as if it were my duty as a mother and grandmother to pay. Nothing was ever presented as a favor or a loan. They were demands, wrapped in the language of family obligation. The final straw came when Tanisha asked me to fund their family vacation. "Skylar's never been to the beach," she said in that practiced, manipulative voice of hers. "All her friends are going this summer. We don't want her to feel left out." The trip cost $2,500. It was money I didn't have unless I completely drained my emergency savings. But the guilt weighed on me. The thought of Skylar feeling excluded broke my heart. What kind of grandmother would deny her granddaughter such an experience? So I paid for the trip, working extra hours for 3 months to earn it back, while I scrubbed office floors until my knees ached. My family enjoyed a week in the Bahamas, posting smiling photos from luxury restaurants and white sand beaches. Was I invited? Of course not. "We didn't think you'd be interested." "Mom, you're not really a beach person," Marcus said when they returned, tanned and carefree, as if the fact that I had paid for the entire vacation meant nothing. Looking at those photos, my family's happiness bought with my sacrifice, yet lived without me, Something inside me finally broke. It wasn't love I felt anymore. It was addiction. An addiction to being needed, to believing that my usefulness equaled love. I had mistaken dependency for affection. And after the humiliation of that last night, after Skylar spilled grape juice on me in front of everyone, while they all laughed, I knew the truth could no longer be ignored. There would be no gratitude, no redemption, no change. It was time for them to realize how much they had depended on the old Essie they had taken for granted. On Monday morning, I woke with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't cry. I didn't lose sleep wondering if I had overreacted. For the first time, I knew exactly what needed to be done. I had a quiet breakfast, then opened the safety deposit box where I'd kept years of records. Loan documents, bank transfers, receipts, co-signer papers. Seeing it all together stunned me. Over $43,000 spent keeping their lives afloat. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called attorney Silas Jenkins, the same man who had handled my late husband Robert's will. Though well into his 70s, his mind was as sharp as ever. "Good morning, Attorney Jenkins. This is Estelle Dree. I need your help with an urgent family matter. I'd like to discuss withdrawing my name as co-signer on my son's mortgage." There was a pause. Silas knew Marcus and understood the weight of what I was saying. "Estelle, are you sure? The bank may demand immediate repayment or foreclose." "I'm sure," I replied calmly. "That's exactly what I want." I explained briefly what had happened, focusing on facts, not emotions. He listened quietly, asked a few clarifying questions, then said, "Come by my office at 3. I'll review the contracts and prepare what's needed." After hanging up, I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. My next call was to the bank. I spoke with David Sterling, the loan officer who knew me well from all the times I had covered their missed payments. "Mr. Sterling," I began evenly, "I need information about withdrawing as co-signer for the property on Elmwood Avenue." He sounded surprised. "Miss Dree, is there a problem with the loan? The payments are current this month." "There's no problem," I said. "I just want to know my legal options for removing my responsibility." He explained that it was possible only if Marcus and Tanisha qualified for the loan on their own, or found another co-signer. Otherwise, the bank could demand full repayment. "What's the current balance?" I asked, though I already knew. $137,000, he said. I asked him to email the full account statement and the documents needed to begin the process. I could sense his unease. He was already calculating the odds of Marcus and Tanisha managing that debt alone. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat quietly. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel afraid. I felt free, like I had finally dropped a burden I'd carried far too long. 3 weeks later, the call came at 6 in the morning. Marcus. His voice no longer sounded confident. It trembled. "Mom, we got a letter from the bank. It says you're withdrawing your co-signature from the house. This must be a mistake, right? You'd never do something like this without telling us first." In the background, I could hear Tanisha yelling about lawyers and lawsuits. "It's not a mistake, Marcus," I said quietly. "The letter is correct," silence followed. I could hear his quickened breathing as he realized what my calm voice truly meant. "Why would you do this, Mom? Is it because of what happened at the party? That was just a kid's prank." Marcus was trying to make it sound like an innocent act of childish mischief, instead of the deliberate public humiliation it truly was. "Of course, Marcus. Kids will be kids," I replied evenly. My voice was calm but detached. "However, this has nothing to do with children's pranks. It has to do with the fact that for 6 years, I have been financially responsible for a house where I am not welcome, where I am treated as a burden, and where I am humiliated without consequence." My tone remained steady, but there was a firmness in it Marcus had never heard before. "But Mom, this is our home. Skylar grew up here. You can't do this." Now, panic filled his voice. He was finally realizing that his mother was no longer the pliable woman he could guilt and manipulate. "This is the house I've been paying for, Marcus," I said. "A house you bought, remodeled and enjoyed while I worked double shifts to cover your missed payments. A house where you celebrated the new kitchen I financed without even inviting me to see it. It's time you learned to take responsibility for your own decisions." I hung up before he could respond. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Tanisha. Her tone was not desperate. It was furious. "Essie, how dare you do this? We're your family. You can't let Skylar lose her home over an old woman's tantrum." Her words dripped with venom, her hostility no longer hidden behind fake politeness. "Tanisha," I said calmly, "you made it clear that I don't have a place in your family. Now you'll learn what life is like without my financial support." My response only enraged her more. "You're a bitter, selfish old woman. We always knew you were like this. You're destroying your granddaughter's life out of revenge." She was screaming so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "The only people destroying Skylar's life," I said, "are her parents, who spent money they didn't have instead of teaching her respect." Then I hung up again, and this time, I unplugged the landline. For the next few days, they tried everything to make me change my mind. Marcus came to my workplace, waiting in the parking lot, his eyes red and tired. "Mom, please, let's talk like adults. I know you're hurt, but this is too much. We can fix it." "Marcus," I said quietly, "for 6 years I've been the adult, working extra hours to keep your house afloat, while you treated me like I was invisible. Now it's your turn to act like one and face the consequences of your choices." I didn't wait for his reply. I walked to my car and drove off. Their next tactic was Skylar. One afternoon, I came home to find my granddaughter sitting on the steps of my building, her school uniform dirty, eyes red from crying. She had walked 8 blocks from school, something her parents would never have allowed under normal circumstances. "Grandma, Mom says you're going to make us lose our house. Is it true?" she asked, her little voice trembling. For a moment, guilt stabbed at my chest. But then I remembered those same eyes glaring at me with disdain as she spilled grape juice on my dress. "Skylar," I said gently, "tell your mom that adults make adult decisions. This is not your responsibility." I walked her home, firm despite her tears and questions about why Grandma didn't help anymore. Marcus and Tanisha were waiting at the door, his face desperate, hers furious. "Mom, look what you're doing to Skylar. Is this what you want? To make your granddaughter suffer?" Marcus shouted, pointing to the sobbing child clinging to Tanisha's leg. "What I don't want," I replied, "is for my granddaughter to grow up thinking it's acceptable to disrespect her elders because her parents allow it." My words hit like shards of glass. Skylar is suffering because you're using her as a pawn, instead of teaching her that actions have consequences. That night, someone keyed my car, scraping the word egoist into the driver's door and deflating all 4 tires. When the police arrived, the officer asked if I had any suspects. "I have some ideas," I admitted, "but no proof." He nodded, understanding. "Install security cameras if you can, ma'am. Cases like this tend to get worse before they get better." He was right. The next week, someone threw rotten eggs at my door. Then came balloons filled with red paint bursting against my windows. The police couldn't do much. It was harassment that skirted the edge of legality. But it was enough to make me feel like a target in my own home. Marcus began appearing at my job again, waiting outside the buildings I cleaned at night. "Mom, this is ridiculous," he said one evening. "We're family. Families don't destroy each other over misunderstandings." But his voice carried a new edge, a subtle threat. "Families also don't humiliate their mothers in public," I replied. "If you want to fix this, start by apologizing properly, and by showing that you understand what you did wrong." "We already apologized. What more do you want?" he shouted. "You never apologized, Marcus. You minimized what happened and blamed me for being too sensitive." His face twisted with anger. "Fine, we're sorry. Happy now? Now take your name off the cosign and stop ruining our lives. He shouted so loudly that office workers came out to watch. That's not an apology, I said quietly. That's rage disguised as remorse. A real apology means understanding why it was wrong and changing your behavior, not saying words just to get your way. I turned and walked away as he yelled after me. When I got home that night, all 4 of my tires were slashed, and my windshield was shattered. This time there was no question. Things had escalated. The note taped to my door made it unmistakably clear. Last chance, you crazy old woman. Sign the papers or things are going to get worse. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of doubt crept into my mind. Had I gone too far? Was all of this worth it just to make a point? But then I remembered the laughter. My family laughing while grape juice dripped down my dress. I remembered years of being treated like an ATM with legs. I remembered every humiliation I had swallowed in silence. No, I hadn't gone too far. I was only just beginning. The call that changed everything came on a Wednesday morning while I was having breakfast. It was Brenda Miller, the secretary from the construction company where Marcus had worked 2 years ago. She had always been kind to me whenever I stopped by the office. Mrs. Estelle, I need to talk to you about something important, she said in a hushed, uneasy voice. Can we meet privately? It's about Marcus and some documents I found while we were cleaning out the old files. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a small coffee shop near my apartment. Brenda arrived on time, clutching a manila folder against her chest as though it contained something dangerous. She sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she ordered a coffee. Ms. Estelle, she began, what I'm about to show you could get me into trouble, but you deserve to know the truth. She opened the folder and laid several photocopied documents on the table. When Marcus worked for us, he managed material and supplier accounts. We discovered these falsified invoices. He had been submitting them to claim reimbursements for materials that were never purchased. The papers bore Marcus's handwriting, edited to inflate amounts. A $300 lumber invoice had been altered to $1,300. A $200 cement order was changed to $700. There were at least 15 such documents, all clear evidence of fraud. How much did he take in total? I asked. My voice was unnervingly calm. About $8,000 over 6 months, she replied. The owner didn't press charges. Marcus was well liked, and they wanted to avoid trouble. They just fired him quietly. Brenda's eyes searched my face, expecting tears, maybe disbelief. Instead, I just asked, why are you telling me this now? She took a deep breath. Because yesterday Marcus came by the office. He was begging the boss for a letter of recommendation. Said he needed to prove he'd been a reliable employee to get a bank loan. And he told us you were being difficult, trying to ruin his financial stability out of spite. The pieces began to fall perfectly into place. Marcus wasn't just scrambling to fix his finances. He was rewriting the story, painting himself as the victim and me as the irrational antagonist. He wanted a record to defend himself when the mortgage trouble became public. Can I keep copies of these? I asked. Brenda nodded and handed me the entire folder. There's more, she said. I spoke with Patrice Washington from HR. She remembered Marcus faking overtime hours and selling company tools for cash. The image of my son, the one I had carried for so long, was shattering. Marcus wasn't a man struggling with bad luck. He was a man who built his comfort on deceit. Brenda gave me contact numbers for 3 former co-workers who could confirm what she'd said. That night, I called them one by one. Darren Scott, a construction supervisor, didn't hesitate. Miss Dupree, your son's got honesty problems. I caught him stealing tools and selling them online. When I confronted him, he threatened to accuse me of theft if I reported it. Next was Patrice Washington. She confirmed the falsified overtime and then added something that made my stomach twist. Marcus used to brag about tricking you into co-signing for his house. Said you didn't even understand what you were signing. That you were easy to manipulate because you were scared of losing your family. Those words hit harder than any insult ever could. He hadn't just exploited my finances. He had preyed on my love, on my loneliness. The last call was to Leonard Bell, the company accountant. "Ms. Estelle," he said quietly, "Marcus offered me $500 to forge income statements for him a few months ago. I refused, but I think he found someone else who didn't." When the calls ended, I spread all the papers across my coffee table. It wasn't just Marcus deceiving me. It was years of layered lies, a web of fraud and manipulation. All the money I'd sent for emergencies had likely been to cover the consequences of his own thefts, not misfortune. The next morning I went to see attorney Silas Jenkins with everything I'd gathered. His eyes widened as he reviewed the documents and testimonies. "Estelle," he said gravely, "this is serious. Your son has committed multiple counts of fraud, against employers and against you. You could press criminal charges." "I don't want to put my son in prison," I said, "but I do want this legally documented in case he tries to sue me or cause trouble over the mortgage." Silas nodded. "We'll prepare a sworn affidavit with all the evidence. I also suggest informing the bank. Marcus may have submitted false income records when applying for the loan." That afternoon, when I returned home, Marcus was waiting in the parking lot. And he wasn't alone. 2 men stood with him, both tall, broad, and unmistakably menacing. My first instinct was to turn and leave, but something inside me refused to show fear. "Mom," Marcus said coolly, "these are my friends, Alfred and Manny. They understand business and family. They think you should reconsider your decision about the house." His voice was colder now, detached, deliberate, and dangerous. Judge 5409, Thorne looked at him with a severe expression. Mr. Trevino, you opened the door to the question of character for your Fought 16 and motivations when you alleged that my client was acting maliciously. Mr. Marcus DRI's previous conduct is 5422 absolutely relevant to establishing a pattern of dishonest behavior toward his mother. Brenda Miller was the first 5429 witness to take the stand. She spoke clearly and calmly about the fraudulent documents she had found, about the 5436 admissions Marcus had made about manipulating his mother, and about his recent attempt to obtain false letters for of recommendation. "Ms. Miller, did Mr. Marcus Dree ever express remorse for 5447 defrauding his previous employer?" Silas asked. "No, sir. In fact, when I spoke 54.52 with him last week, he told me that his mother was a difficult woman who didn't understand how modern families work. He 5458 said she was being selfish for not continuing to support them financially. When Darren Scott testified about the 5505 theft of tools and the threats Marcus had made to him, I could see the judge's expression hardening more and more. When 5511 Patrice Washington told about the faked overtime hours and Marcus's derogatory comments about my supposed naive, the 5519 judge took extensive notes. The most impactful moment came when Silas called 5524 me to the stand to testify. I had practiced my testimony for days, but 5530, when the moment came to speak, the words flowed naturally. "Your Honor, for 6 years, I have worked 55.36 double shifts, emptied my savings and mortgaged my financial future to keep 55.2 afloat, a family that treated me like I was invisible. I paid for vacations I at 5.47 was not invited to, for renovations I could not enjoy, for a house where my 5.52 presence was tolerated, but not desired. I described the incident at Tanisha's 5558 birthday party, the public humiliation I had suffered, and the years of emotional abuse I had silently endured. Your Honor, the day my own granddaughter fixed her 9 through grape juice on me while my whole family laughed, I finally understood that it wasn't love that kept me helping 15 them. It was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of admitting that the people for whom I had sacrificed everything didn't 56.0 truly want me. When Marcus's lawyer tried to cross-examine me, his questions focused on trying to paint me as a confused, vindictive older woman. Miss Dree, isn't 5634 it true that you are doing this out of spite because you felt offended at a family party? No, sir. I am doing this on 5641 because I finally understood that for years I have been the victim of emotional and financial fraud. My son under 5647 and his wife built their lifestyle on lies and on my money. And when I tried to set boundaries, they resorted to 5653 intimidation and vandalism. I presented the photographs of the damage to my car, the written threats I-57 Poix had received, and testified about the intimidating men Marcus had brought to pressure me. Your Honor, a mother, who 5706 truly loves her family, does not resort to physical intimidation when that family sets reasonable financial 5713 boundaries. When all the testimonies ended, the judge retired to deliberate for 1:57.18 hour. When she returned, her verdict was clear and unequivocal. This court finds 57.24 that Ms. Estelle Dupree has acted within her legal rights in withdrawing her co-signature from the mortgage loan in 57.31 question. Furthermore, this court finds compelling evidence of a pattern of fraudulent and manipulative behavior, 38, the part of Mr. Marcus Dupree toward his mother. The judge ordered that the lawsuit against me be dismissed, 45 completely. Furthermore, she ordered that Marcus and Tanisha pay all my legal costs, a total of $4,500, $57.54. She also issued a restraining order prohibiting them from contacting me or approaching my property for one full 58, under 1 year. Mr. Marcus DRI, this court warns that any future harassment or 58.07 intimidation toward your mother will result in criminal charges. Ms. Dupree has the right to live free from threats, threat and manipulation, even when those threats come from members of her own family. 19. When I left the courthouse that afternoon, Silas shook my hand with a genuine smile. Estelle, you won more 58.26 than a legal case today. You won your freedom. For the first time in 32 years, I felt completely free. 2 years have passed since the day of the trial. 2 years in which my life has changed in ways I never would have imagined. By 44 possible. I am sitting in the small coffee shop that I opened with the money I had been spending on keeping Marcus, 58, 51, and Tanisha's financial life afloat. Robert's Corner is named after my late 58-56 husband, and every morning when I open the doors, I feel as if he is here with me, proud of the woman I have finally now become. The coffee shop is located downtown in a space I rent for $900 a $59.09 month. With the $4,500 that Marcus and Tanisha had to pay me for legal costs, plus the savings I had, 59.17 accumulated by no longer having to cover their expenses, I was able to make the necessary renovations and purchase the 5924 initial equipment. It is not a luxurious place, but it is mine. The walls of 5930 painted a warm cream color. There are plants in every corner, and soft jazz 159.35 music creates a cozy atmosphere. I serve fresh coffee, homemade pastries that I 5940 bake every morning, and simple sandwiches for lunch. My regular customers include area office workers, 947 college students, and senior couples who come to enjoy a quiet environment. Brenda Miller became my first part-time employee. After she testified on my behalf, she lost her job at the 59 construction office because the boss feared retaliation from other corrupt employees. Miss Estelle, she told me as Stooks when I offered her the job. Working for you is an honor. I finally get to work for someone who values honesty. 14. The coffee shop generates enough income to cover my living expenses and allows me to save a small amount each month. It won't grow 22 is not a fortune, but it is were honest stability built on my own efforts, not on the manipulation of others. Every one $29 that enters my register is clean, earned through hard work and fair dealing with my customers. The mornings one, sauce 36, are my favorite. I arrive at 5:30 to start baking the day's pastries. The aroma of cinnamon and coffee filling the Patjot 43 empty space gives me a feeling of peace I hadn't experienced in years. There is no phone ringing with family financial 50 emergencies, no emotional drama, just the honest work of creating something that makes people happy. My regular 57 customers have become a kind of chosen family. There is Mrs. Hortensia, a 75-year-old woman who comes every Tuesday, 1:04 and Thursday, for a latte and tells me about her grandchildren who live in another city. Unlike my experience with 1-1-11 Skylar, Mrs. Hortensia talks about her grandchildren with genuine pride, and 4:1.16, they call her regularly to ask how she is. There is also Mr. Tha Manuel, A101, 22 widowed man my age, who comes every morning at 8 Farah to have breakfast before going to his part-time job at A101 28 bookstore. We have developed a friendship based on quiet conversations about books, movies, and life in Zone 35 general. There is no drama, no manipulation, just two adults who enjoy 140 each other's company without toxic expectations. On weekends, I organize small events at 1.1.47 the coffee shop, poetry reading nights, board game afternoons for seniors, and 152 book swap sessions. These events attract people who, like me, have discovered. 1. Pen White that true community is built on mutual respect and shared interests, not on 1-1, Baodo 2. Donner's 3 forced family obligations. The restraining order against Marcus and Tanisha expired 6 months ago, but they too, Levin, have made no attempt to contact me. According to the few things I've heard through mutual acquaintances, they lost signing the house 3 months after the trial. The bank proceeded with the foreclosure exactly as Silas had predicted, and they... 2. 24 had to move to a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Marcus got a job at a landscaping company for 1.230 minimum wage. The only employment he could find after his history of fraud became known in the local construction 1-2-37 community. Tanisha had to get a full-time job at a supermarket to help cover basic expenses. Their lifestyle 1.44 changed drastically. But they are finally living within their real means instead of relying on other people's. 250 money. Information about Skylar occasionally reaches me through Mrs. Hortensia, who knows some of the mothers. Todd 56 at the school where my granddaughter studies. Skylar adapted to the change better than expected. Apparently, the 1-3 experience of moving and seeing her parents work hard taught her lessons about responsibility that she had never 9 learned when everything came easily to them. 3 weeks ago, I saw Skylar from 103 or 14 the window of my coffee shop. She was walking down the street with a friend, both in school uniforms, laughing about 03 something one of them had said. She had grown into a taller, more mature 10-year-old. With a more serious but 326 also more genuine expression. For a moment our eyes met through the glass. 3:31. Skylar stopped and looked at me for several seconds. I could see recognition in her eyes, but also something that 03:37 seemed to be understanding. It wasn't the defiant look of the girl who had thrown grape juice on me 2 years ago. 3. It was the look of someone who had learned that actions have consequences, and that respect is earned. Not 10350 demanded. She raised her hand slightly as if to wave to me, but then kept walking. 3:50. I don't hold resentment towards Skylar. She was just a child being used by adults who didn't know how to teach her. 4 proper values. Now she is learning those values through direct experience, which is probably a better teacher than any Bompro 409 sermon I could have given. Silas Jenkins comes to visit me once a month. Always row 415 ordering black coffee and one of my lemon cakes. Estelle, he told me during 1420, his most recent visit. You are a perfect example of why justice is worth fighting for. You not only defended yourself, but 104 on 27, you probably saved that family from continuing down a path that would have led them to much worse consequences. He 104-33 is right, by forcing Marcus and Tanisha to face financial reality. I gave them 04-39, the opportunity to build a life based on honesty instead of manipulation and fraud. It's a tough lesson, but one they 104-46 needed to learn before their problems escalated to more serious legal consequences. 4. My apartment feels different now. It is no longer a refuge where I hide from a family that mistreats me. It is my home 10501 decorated with things I like, full of books I enjoy reading and visited by people who genuinely value my company. I 105-08 have plants that I meticulously care for, paintings I chose because they make me smile, and a tranquility that comes 5-15 from knowing that no one can manipulate my emotions to get my money. 5 or 20. On Sundays, instead of sitting through uncomfortable family gatherings, I go to church at a small, predominantly black 105-27 church near my house. After the service, I often have lunch with other members of the congregation who have become genuine 105-34 friends. They are people who know me as Estelle, the coffee shop owner, not as Estelle, the mother who can be 1.541 financially exploited. This morning, as I prepared the coffee for another day of honest work, I looked at myself in the 105-48 small mirror I have behind the counter. The woman looking back at me was 66 years old, with a few more wrinkles than bound 2 years ago, but eyes that sparkled with a confidence I hadn't seen in decades. I am not rich. I don't have a 106-03 big family to celebrate me on holidays. I don't have grandchildren who call me to tell me about their school and 06-09 achievements. But I have something I hadn't had in years: self-respect and control over my own life. The best 106.16 revenge, as they say, is living well. And for the first time in my adult life, that is exactly what I am doing. This one's 06-24 afternoon. As I locked up the coffee shop after another successful day, I noticed a familiar figure standing 06.30 across the street. It was Marcus, thinner and in dirty work clothes, watching my cafe from a distance. He 106-37 didn't approach. He didn't try to come in. He just stood there for a few minutes before moving on. In his eyes, I 106-4 saw something I had never seen before. Respect, maybe even a little pride. His 106-50 mother, the woman he had underestimated for so many years, had built something of her own with her own hands. She was 106-56 no longer the victim he could manipulate. She was an independent businesswoman who had found her own 07.02 dignity. I locked the cafe door, turned off the lights, and walked home under the 07-08 afternoon sun. Tomorrow would be another day of honest work, another day of living life on my own terms. And I 107-15 couldn't be happier. 6 more months have passed, and this November morning, I woke up to the news 27-21 that my coffee shop had been selected as Small Business of the Month by the local Chamber of Commerce. The recognition 07-28 plaque will arrive next week, along with an article in the local newspaper that will include my photograph, and the story 07, the earth of how a 66-year-old woman started her first business. The irony is not lost on 107-40. For decades, no one in my family saw me as capable of achieving anything significant on my own. I was just the 47 older woman they could use to solve their financial problems. Now, strangers recognize me as a successful 750 or entrepreneur who has contributed positively to the community. Brenda brought me my coffee this morning with a 108 radiant smile. Ms. Estelle, My daughter asked me yesterday if you could give her 08-5 advice on how to open her own bakery. She says you are her inspiration for older women who want to keep growing. I won 08-12 laughed when I heard this, remembering how many times Marcus and Tanisha had insinuated that I was too old to on or wait by 19 understand the modern world. The Chamber of Commerce recognition includes an invitation to speak at a seminar on 1-8-26 entrepreneurship for seniors. Apparently, my story has inspired other people in my age range who believed it 1-08-33 was too late to start something new. The event coordinator explained that there is a growing demand for stories like 1-8-39 mine, stories of people who found their purpose after 60. Mr. Manuel has become 8-4 more than a regular customer. Over the last few weeks, we have started taking walks in the park on Sundays after I-1-08-51 closed the coffee shop. Yesterday, he brought me wildflowers he had picked during his morning walk. A simple 1-08-57 gesture, but full of genuine consideration. It is refreshing to be with someone who wants nothing from me. 1-09-03 accept my company. Estelle, he told me yesterday as we shared a slice of apple 1-09 oat pie. It's admirable how you built all of this after what you went 1-09-14 through with your family. We rarely talk about my previous situation, but when we 1-09-19 do, he always refers to it with respect and understanding, never with pity or judgment. Last week, I decided to expand 1-09-27, the cafe's menu to include more elaborate home-cooked meals. I now serve 1-09-32 stews, soups, and traditional dishes that I prepare every morning before opening. The demand has been so high 938 that I am considering hiring another part-time person to help with the cooking. It is strange to think that 1-9 less than 3 years ago, I was worrying about how to pay my own bills, and now I am creating jobs for others. The weekend 1-09-51 events have evolved too. This Saturday, we will have our first story swap. Night 1-09-57, where customers can share meaningful life experiences. The idea came up when 10-02 Mrs. Hortensia mentioned that many older people feel invisible in a society that primarily values the young. My cafe has, 10 become a space where life experiences are valued as wisdom, not dismissed as irrelevance. Yesterday, I received a 1-10-17 unexpected letter. It was from Darren Scott, the construction supervisor who had testified about Marcus's fraudulent 1024 activities. He wrote to tell me that Marcus had applied for a job at his new company, but he had rejected the 1030 application due to his history. Ms. Estelle, the letter read, I wanted you, Swite 1036, to know that your brave decision to expose the truth has protected other employers from being defrauded. Your son 1-10-40 needed to face real consequences to have any chance of changing. Tahen 49, his words made me reflect on something I had been avoiding considering. Had my decision really been beneficial for 1-10-55 Marcus in the long run? The answer, I believe, is yes. For years, my constant more financial rescues had taught him that he could escape the consequences of his actions. Now, for the first time in his 1.11-07 adult life, he is experiencing the direct connection between decisions and 1.11 results. Brenda told me she saw him last week, working in the garden of a house in our neighborhood. He looked tired, but 19 focused on his work, something she had never observed in him during the years he worked at the construction office. He 1-11-26 looked different, she told me, more serious, as if he finally understood that honest work requires honest effort. Anne 34, 2 weeks ago, while organizing old papers in my apartment, I found a photograph of the family they had taken, girl 11, father on the Bahamas vacation that I had paid for. In the image, Marcus, Tanisha, and 1-11 40x Skylar were smiling radiantly on the beach, tanned and relaxed with no 111.52 indication that those vacations had been financed by someone who wasn't welcome to join them. For the first time, I was 11.59 able to look at that photograph without feeling pain. Instead, I felt a strange 12 over kind of satisfaction. Those had been the last vacations funded by unearned money. Any future trips that Bond 12.12 family took would be paid for with honest work and responsible planning. In a way, my refusal to continue being 12.19 their unlimited financial source had been the best gift I could have given them. My therapist, Dr. Laura Munoz, 1.12.26 suggested that I start writing a journal about this experience. Estelle, she told me during our most recent session, your 1.12.33 story could help other people who are living similar situations of family financial abuse. Many people, especially 1240 women your age, feel trapped in toxic patterns because they believe they have no options. I have started writing at 1:12:48 night after closing the cafe. It is not easy to revisit all those years of manipulation and self-deception, but it 1:12:5 is also liberating to put into words what I lived and how I found the strength to change it. Perhaps someday, 13. These reflections can become something more formal, a book or a series of articles that help others in similar 3.09 situations. What surprises me the most about this new phase of my life is how productive I feel. For years, my energy had been constantly drained by family, 19 crises and financial emergencies that never ended. Now, that same energy is 1/13/24 channeled into creating, building, and contributing in positive ways. It is as 1/13/29 if I have discovered reserves of creativity and ambition that had been dormant for decades. Last month, a young 1/13/37 reporter from the local newspaper interviewed me for an article on women entrepreneurs. That point 42, during the conversation, she asked me if I ever regretted the drastic decisions I had made with my family. My answer was, 13:49 immediate. The only regret I have is waiting so long to properly value 13.5 myself. That sentence became the featured quote in the article. And since then, several women have come to the 114.002 cafe, specifically to meet me and tell me their own stories of difficult family relationships. It is comforting to know, 1409, that I am not alone in having experienced these kinds of situations. And it is empowering to be able to offer to 16 my story as an example that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. This a 1:14:21 morning, as I prepared the pastries for the day, I realized that November had arrived without me even thinking about 4/28, the approaching Christmas holidays. For decades, this time of year had been a 1/14:33 source of anxiety, because it meant more family expenses, more gifts that wouldn't be appreciated, more gatherings, where I would be treated as an unwanted guest in my own family. This year will 1/14/44 be different. Brenda and I have planned to decorate the cafe for Christmas and offer seasonal specialties. Mr. Manuel 1452 mentioned that he has no specific plans for Christmas Eve, and Mrs. Hortensia commented that her children will not be so fond 58 able to visit her this year. I am considering organizing a small Christmas dinner at the cafe for regular customers, 1505, who like me have created their own definitions of family, based on mutual 15 kindness and respect. The truth is, I feel happier and more 16 complete, now at 66, than I have felt since I was 20. It is a different kind of happiness than the one I had, sought 1/15/22 for so many years. It doesn't depend on the approval of others or on feeling needed. It comes from within, from one door find sign. knowing that I have built something valuable with my own hands, and that I have finally learned to respect myself. 15:36 tomorrow will begin another day of work at my cafe. Another day of serving people who value what I offer. Another 1.1544 day of living on my own terms. And that is exactly how it should be. Did you and 1550 like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can want 1556 support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet 11602 support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I 11609 highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life, 11616 story. With love and respect.